At its height, the Russian Empire covered 1/6 of the world's land and ruled over more than 100 million people, yet within 2 centuries it collapsed under its own weight. The rise, golden age, and fall of the Russian Empire is a journey through history to discover how Imperial Russia rose so far and why it fell so hard. But before we start, please help support this channel by subscribing, and if you have an idea for a video, feel free to leave it in the comments. Let's get started. To understand the Russian Empire, we must go back farther than 1721. Its roots lie in Kievan Rus, a federation of East Slavic principalities that thrived from the 9th to the 13th century. Kievan Rus flourished as a Christian civilization under princes such as Vladimir the Great and Yaroslav the Wise, blending Slavic, Norse, and Byzantine influences. But beginning in the 12th century, internal divisions and Mongol invasions weakened its unity. The Mongols established control over the Russian principalities for more than 200 years, forcing them to pay tribute and leaving deep marks on their political culture. As Mongol power waned, a new center of leadership emerged in Moscow. The princes of Moscow consolidated neighboring territories and began to challenge Mongol dominance. Ivan III, known as Ivan the Great, reigned from 1462 to 1505 and turned Moscow into the nucleus of a new Russian state. He annexed Novgorod, ended tribute to the Golden Horde, and married Sophia Paleologina, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor. That marriage reinforced the idea that Moscow was the Third Rome, the new center of Orthodox Christianity. Ivan's grandson, Ivan IV, remembered as Ivan the Terrible, became the first ruler to assume the title Tsar of all Russia. He expanded Russian control over the Volga River basin by conquering Kazan and Astrakhan, opening the way to Siberia. His reign also left deep scars through brutal repression and economic strain. After his death, the country fell into chaos known as the Time of Troubles. Famine, foreign invasion, and civil strife nearly destroyed the state until 1613, when the Romanov dynasty took power and began to rebuild. By the early 18th century, the Tsardom of Russia remained largely rural, its economy based on agriculture and serf labor. Yet the state had begun to look westward for models of modernization. The person who transformed that vision into reality was Peter I, better known as Peter the Great. Peter ruled from 1682 to 1725 and redefined Russia's place in the world. Fascinated by Western technology and governance, he traveled across Europe to learn shipbuilding and statecraft firsthand. When he returned home, he undertook sweeping reforms. He reorganized the army and built a modern navy from scratch. He changed the structure of government, introducing a bureaucracy and encouraging merit-based service among the nobility. Peter compelled his court to adopt Western dress and etiquette, promoted education in the sciences, and founded the Russian Academy of Sciences. His greatest ambition was to secure access to the sea. The Great Northern War against Sweden, fought from 1700 to 1721, was long and brutal, but Russia's victory gave it a vital Baltic coastline. Peter founded a new capital on that coastline, St. Petersburg, a city built on swamps to symbolize Russia's new window to Europe. In 1721, after his victory, the Senate officially proclaimed him Emperor of all Russia, marking the birth of the Russian Empire. The decades after Peter's death were turbulent. The throne changed hands repeatedly through palace coups and short reigns. The Guards' regiments became power brokers, and the court was rife with intrigue. Nevertheless, the state continued to modernize. Under Empress Elizabeth, who ruled from 1741 to 1762, Russia promoted the arts and sciences and became a formidable European power, participating in the 7 Years' War. In 1762, a new ruler took the throne, Catherine II, remembered as Catherine the Great. A German princess who seized power after the overthrow of her husband, Peter III, she ruled for more than 30 years. Catherine considered herself an enlightened monarch, inspired by the ideas of Voltaire and Diderot. she reformed provincial administration, sought to codify laws, and encouraged education. Yet her rule also reinforced noble privilege and deepened the reliance on serf labor. The peasant uprising led by Yemelyan Pugachev in the 1770s revealed the depth of rural resentment and the fragility of imperial order. Catherine expanded Russia's territory on a massive scale. She annexed Crimea, pushed deeper into the Black Sea region, and participated in the partitions of Poland, bringing millions of new subjects into the empire. By the time of her death in 1796, Russia was one of Europe's great powers. But beneath the splendor of the court and the expanding frontiers lay the persistent contradictions of autocracy, inequality, and social unrest. The 19th century opened with both opportunity and peril. Alexander I came to power in 1801 and introduced limited administrative and educational reforms. At first, he entertained liberal ideas inspired by the Enlightenment, but the Napoleonic Wars soon dominated his reign. Russia suffered early defeats, but later became the decisive force in Napoleon's downfall. The 1812 French invasion of Russia ended in catastrophe for Napoleon's army. The burning of Moscow and the harsh winter destroyed his forces, and Russian troops later marched into Paris. After victory, Alexander emerged as one of Europe's leading monarchs. In 1815, at the Congress of Vienna, he secured new territories and helped establish a conservative order to preserve royal authority. Yet the war's hardships and unmet promises of reform left many Russians disillusioned. Secret societies formed among officers and intellectuals, hoping for a constitution or greater freedom. When Alexander died suddenly in 1825, confusion over the succession triggered the Decembrist revolt, an attempted coup by reform-minded officers who demanded constitutional government. Nicholas I, Alexander's brother, crushed the uprising and began one of the most repressive reigns in Russian history. Nicholas I ruled with iron discipline. His ideology rested on three pillars: orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality. Censorship was strict, dissent was persecuted, and a vast secret police network monitored society. Yet Nicholas also presided over further expansion into the Caucasus and Central Asia. His downfall came through the Crimean War against the Ottoman Empire, Britain, and France. The defeat in 1856 exposed how far Russia lagged behind Western industrial powers. Outdated weapons, poor supply systems, and inadequate railroads made modernization unavoidable. Alexander II, who came to power in 1855, recognized the need for reform. His most famous act was the emancipation of the serfs in 1861. Over 20 million peasants were freed from personal bondage, but they received little land and were burdened with redemption payments that kept them impoverished. Still, the abolition of serfdom marked a turning point. It opened new labor markets, fostered urban growth, and began to reshape Russian society. Alexander also introduced judicial reforms with independent courts and juries, created local self-government through the Zemstvo system, and expanded education. The reforms inspired hope, but also frustration. Conservatives feared instability, while radicals saw the changes as inadequate. Revolutionary groups formed in secret, influenced by socialist and anarchist ideas. In 1881, Alexander II was assassinated by a radical group known as the People's Will. His death ended the era of reform and ushered in a return to reaction. Alexander III reversed many liberal policies and ruled with a heavy hand. He promoted Russification, imposing the Russian language and Orthodox faith on diverse nationalities within the empire. Non-Russian peoples in the Baltics, Poland, and the Caucasus faced cultural repression. Yet during his reign, industrial development accelerated, railways expanded, foreign investment grew, and new factories appeared in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and the Urals. The Trans-Siberian Railway, begun in the 1890s, linked European Russia to the Pacific, symbolizing imperial ambition and modernization. In 1894, when Alexander III died, his son Nicholas II inherited the throne. Nicholas was deeply devoted to the idea of divine autocracy, but lacked his father's authority and his grandfather's vision. His reign began with optimism, but soon spiraled into crisis. In 1904, Russia went to war with Japan over influence in Manchuria and Korea. The conflict ended in humiliating defeat. The loss shocked the nation and undermined confidence in the government. In January 1905, peaceful activists led by Father Georgy Gapon progressed to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg to present a petition. Soldiers opened fire on the crowd, killing and wounding hundreds. The event, known as Bloody Sunday, ignited protests, strikes, and mutinies across the empire. Under mounting pressure, Nicholas issued the October Manifesto, promising civil liberties and a representative assembly called the Duma. For the first time, Russians were granted limited participation in government, yet the Tsar soon restricted the Duma's powers, dissolving it when it challenged his authority. The cycle of repression and reform left the country restless. Despite political turmoil, industrial growth continued. By the early 20th century, Russia was becoming one of the world's leading producers of steel and oil. Urban populations swelled, but working conditions were harsh, wages low, and living quarters crowded. The gap between the rich and the poor widened, and socialist movements gained strength. In 1914, Russia entered World War I alongside Britain and France. The decision proved disastrous. The army was large but poorly equipped. Millions of soldiers died, food shortages plagued the cities, and transportation systems broke down. The Tsar's decision to assume personal command of the army in 1915 left domestic affairs in the hands of his wife, Alexandra, and the mystic Rasputin, whose influence over the royal family fueled scandal and eroded public trust. By 1917, the empire was on the brink of collapse. Strikes and protests erupted in Petrograd. Soldiers mutinied rather than fire on the crowds. The government lost control. Nicholas II abdicated in March 1917, ending more than 300 years of Romanov rule. The empire ceased to exist, replaced by a provisional government that struggled to maintain order amid war and revolution. Later in 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power in the October Revolution, and the imperial family was executed the following summer. The fall of the Russian Empire was the result of deep structural contradictions that had built up over centuries. Autocracy resisted the reforms needed for modernization. The emancipation of the serfs came too late and left peasants impoverished. Industrialization advanced rapidly, but without political representation or social protection. Ethnic minorities sought autonomy, while the government clung to central control. Wars drained resources and exposed weaknesses. Above all, the ruling elite could not reconcile the demands of a modern society with the old ideology of divine monarchy. Even in collapse, the empire's legacy endured. The territories it had assembled remained largely within the borders of the Soviet Union that succeeded it. Its bureaucratic structures influenced Soviet governance, and its vision of a vast Eurasian state continued to shape Russian identity. The empire's grandeur and tragedy still resonate in Russia's culture and politics, reminding the world how ambition and rigidity can coexist in the same state until they destroy each other. The story of the Russian Empire is one of transformation and tension, of greatness and failure. It began as a small principality on the banks of the Moskva River and expanded into one of the largest empires the world has ever seen. It produced visionary reformers and ruthless autocrats, glorious victories and devastating defeats. Its rise and fall illustrate how power, when unbalanced by reform and accountability, can both build and destroy. The Russian Empire's history is not just the story of a vanished monarchy. It is a reflection on how nations grapple with change, identity, and the weight of their own ambitions. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe for more videos like this one. And if you have an idea for a video, leave it in the comments.